reincarnated as a loner in another world, and every girl wants to be with him. A man named Haruka, who has no friends and a mission to survive. He against goblin battles to magic mishaps, he's about to turn worthless into unstoppable. The story begins with Haruka, a boy hiding from a group of goblins who are busy preparing their meal. Trying to slip away unnoticed, Haruka accidentally snaps a tree branch, instantly drawing all the goblins' attention. He bolts running as fast as he can, but as the goblins close in, Haruka smirks. He suddenly leaps into the air, revealing his trap a hidden pitfall. The goblins tumble straight into it, just as Haruka planned. He tosses off his hoodie, proudly admiring the trap he dug earlier. The scene shifts, showing he's been living alone in this strange world for a while. On an average school day, Haruka is sitting alone at his desk because he is a total loner. He is well aware that he is a loner. As a matter of fact, he enjoys being alone since his only other option would be to hang out with his classmates, and he freaking hates them. There are a bunch of groups in the class, including the delinquents, the popular girls, the gym bros, and then there's the other people no one cares about. Haruka doesn't belong to any of these groups, and he is fine with that since he has a lot more time to read his books with no friends. However, his reading session is interrupted when a bright light appears beneath him. It looks like a summoning circle is spawning beneath the students. And for a moment, Haruka gets excited because he knows this means he gets to go on an Isekai adventure. But then he realizes that he's been getting too much screen time for a loner, and if he knows anything about Isekai, it means he's going to get screwed over somehow. He's not about to let himself become a victim before Black Clover Season 5 drops. So while the portal is still loading, he walks up to the door and tries to leave. Unfortunately, the door seems to be bolted shut with magic. No matter how much force he uses, he isn't able to get out of the room. The portal is almost done loading, and his classmates begin disappearing, fading away. As a last-ditch effort to avoid his otherworldly fate, Haruka decides to crawl into the ceiling vents to wait out the summoning circle. He jumps up and manages to crawl his way into the roof of the class. But just when he thought he was safe, the summoning circle followed him through the roof, and he ended up getting summoned anyway. It sucks that he couldn't stay on Earth, but since he already knows how this kind of thing goes, he expects some kind of fat king or pretty princess to show up soon and ask for his help or something. However, that's not what happens. Haruka sees a bald old man frantically waving his arms around and panicking at the sight of him. Apparently, the old man is God, and he was the one in charge of the summoning. He has already sent all of Haruka's classmates off to the other world, but because Haruka came up with the idea to hide in the ceiling while still getting summoned, his summoning was a mess. So, God needs to send him to the other world quickly before he gets in trouble for this mess. He tells Haruka that he will get abilities to help him in the other world, but since he's late, all the good abilities have already been chosen. The only things remaining are all the leftover ones that no one wanted. To list a few, he has the option of picking skills that equate to professional Roblox, gambling dice, contact lenses, and a stick. To make it worse, he only has a limited number of skills he can choose. Haruka begins taking out his anger on God for summoning him here and only having trash skills left. God knows he messed up, but he didn't graduate from God University just to get yelled at by a high schooler. So, he tells Haruka that he will give him all the remaining trash skills as an apology, but he doesn't want to see his ugly face around here anymore. God then teleports Haruka to the other world immediately.
チートスキルは早い者勝ちで魔法をゲットするようだが43人も召喚するのはダイスはないな。村人 A セットとコンツ A ってほぼ棒だよね。終わってんだろ。よくわからないのしか残ってない。ほうれん草って何？引きこもりでニートってなんだよ。これで終わり？
It's cool that he gets to have more skills than normal, but that doesn't do him much good if he gets tossed out into the woods as soon as he arrives. He's never lived in the woods before, and he has no supplies. But then he notices a pouch on the floor, and it turns out that it's part of the adventure skill. The pouch allows him to store an unlimited number of items in his inventory. There's also a bunch of starter gear in there, so at least Haruka isn't going to be doing this without equipment. After he's got his stuff on, he decides to check his stats. Thanks to the gambling dice, he needs to roll a number to get stat points. He just goes with it and throws the dice on the ground. As a result, he ends up with a score of M, and he has no idea what M means, so he just decides to put the M points all into his luck stat. To his surprise, when he opens his stat window, his luck stat is completely maxed out, making him wish he had used it on something better. He continues looking through his stats, and to his surprise, aside from all the trash skills, he actually gained 2 unique skills as well. Because he was such a loner on Earth, he will be unable to form a party in this world even if he wants to. But in exchange, his second skill allows him to force monsters to serve him because he wouldn't be able to make any friends otherwise. Haruka is a bit disappointed that he won't get a chance to make a harem for himself, but it is what it is. Right now, he's more concerned with the fact that he doesn't see any of his classmates nearby, and he finds that strange since this is supposedly the starting location. Right now, he needs to focus on getting supplies so he can live a good life out here in the woods, but that's a lot easier said than done when he can barely see anything with all the trees in the way. At this rate, it won't be long before he runs into a monster accidentally, and if that were to happen, he would be a dead man for sure. Just then, Haruka remembers that he has a contact lens skill, so he puts on the contact lenses and suddenly he can see all kinds of information about his surroundings. It turns out that the contact lenses come with an inbuilt appraisal skill, and with it, he is able to easily traverse the forest and find some mushrooms that he can eat without dying. He decides to pick some, and thanks to his villager bag, he can take as many as he wants. He then goes over to the river nearby and uses his bag to fetch a little water to drink. Once he's done with that, something else catches his eye. He wanders back into the forest where he finds a little cave. It looks too interesting for him to ignore, so Haruka says a little prayer in case there's a monster here that will attack him. After that, he begins exploring the cave. Luckily, it looks like there aren't any monsters here and this place is quite spacious. So he decides to make this his base of operations. He pulls out a tent and a magic lantern from his bag to set up camp. After which, he then proceeds to light a small fire with his temperature control magic so he can stay warm for the night. Coincidentally, using his temperature magic once allowed him to unlock a new fire skill, and being wary of monsters made him acquire several detection skills as well. But Haruka's only attack skill is a stick, so he still needs to figure out a way to defend himself. The next morning, Haruka wakes up with a jolt, nervously leaves his tent, and to his relief, it looks like there weren't any monster attacks overnight. He is safe, all thanks to the anti-monster properties of his useless skill items. But even if he is safe from harm, it doesn't mean he's safe from hunger. So he busts out a frying pan and cooks up some of the mushrooms he gathered yesterday. And if you're wondering where he got the frying pan, it was just sitting there in his villager bag along with a full set of kitchen knives and some beef jerky. So far, that bag has been the most useful thing in Haruka's arsenal. He wonders what kind of villager stocked it up before he got it. In any case, now that he has eaten, he needs to figure out what he's going to do from now on. He heads outside and takes a little walk to think. For now, that cave will work well as a base of operations, but Haruka still needs to worry about finding a reliable source of food and creating safety measures against any monsters that may try to attack him in this world. Fortunately, with his contact lenses, it shouldn't be too hard for him to gather enough food to last for a while, as he finds some more mushrooms and some herbs almost immediately. But he still has to figure out a solution to his monster problem. Just then, Haruka's detection skill kicks in, and he notices something going on nearby. He decides to go check it out and is horrified once he realizes that the noise was caused by goblins. It would be bad enough it was one, but there are two of them, and they both have strength stats that are higher than his own. He wonders if he will be able to take them down with his current strength and contemplates running away. But the fact that he is living in this forest means he will eventually have to fight the goblins if he wants to survive, so he chooses to get it over with while he still has the element of surprise. With that said, he isn't sure his stick will be good enough for the job on its own, so he tries using one of his trash skills to wrap the stick in magic to see if that does anything. It works out better than he thought, so he lunges out of the bushes and strikes at one of the goblins. After smacking it on the head, the goblin is dazed and confused, but Haruka doesn't stop there and proceeds to beat the daylights out of it until it finally dies. That's one down, but Haruka still has to deal with the other one. As it charges at him, he dodges out of the way of its attack. Now that he has gotten a feel for it, Haruka realizes that the goblin's attacks are actually really easy to predict, so he effortlessly evades it and then proceeds to smack it around before hitting it with a wave of magic.
思った以上にいい感じ。チートを超えてやる。攻撃は単調。
Having just won his first fight against goblins, Haruka thinks that's enough work for the day and decides to head back to the cave so he can rest a little. Once he's back, he roasts some mushrooms for dinner and takes a look at the club he looted off the goblin corpse. It may have high damage, but it's heavy and has a short range. Haruka decides to continue using his stick for now. He then checks the rest of his stats, and to his surprise, he managed to level up from the fight he had today. Not only that, all his existing stats were doubled as a result. By the next morning, Haruka wakes up and has breakfast as usual, but he is starting to get sick of eating nothing but mushrooms all the time. He really wishes he could eat some meat out here, but he's going to have to learn how to hunt to do that. Before that, he needs to learn how to enhance himself first. The first thing he wants to try is the magic fusion skill he acquired. For a quick explanation, it basically covers his entire body with magic in order to boost his physical and magical defenses. It also greatly increases his strength, so he should be able to fight with much more efficiency. Additionally, his appraisal skill was upgraded to level 2, so he uses it to see if anything has changed. But the only difference is that there's a question mark next to all the descriptions. Haruka has clearly never played video games before, because he spends a whole minute trying to figure out what a question mark icon could mean, and eventually he just gives up on it altogether. Instead, he heads outside to do some magic training, and as he is leaving, he notices something on the floor. He picks it up, thinking it might be some meat, but it turns out to be another mushroom. It may be delusional, but Haruka was really hoping meat would just grow on trees in this world, and he soon realizes that he's not going to be finding any meat on the forest floor. So he decides to just go ahead with his magic training. He activates his mana infusion and takes a step forward, but with the physical boost he gets, he ends up flying forward by several meters. His body feels much lighter than before, and with very little effort, he can easily dart around the forest almost like he's teleporting. On top of that, his dexterity is greatly enhanced as well, so he can move and strike at things with precision. The first thing he does with his enhanced strength is challenge 2 random goblins, and unlike yesterday, he is able to knock the goblin out in one hit. He's feeling really confident about his new strength, so he thinks he can handle even more goblins. But when he actually sees a group of 3 goblins, he starts having second thoughts and slowly backs away before he gets jumped. He decides that he has worked hard enough for today and heads back to his cave so he can practice his magic. He continues this routine, practicing fighting during the day and tinkering with his magic at night to see what he can do with it. Apparently, he can make coffee tables by following this routine. Haruka is eventually able to one-shot a goblin and create a proper table with his magic crafting. He then uses it to create a gate for his cave so he can go out at night, and that means he can finally go hunting. He goes after a rabbit because he hasn't tasted meat in so long, but when he finally catches up to it and is about to start cooking, he notices something else nearby. At first, he thinks it's a goblin, but upon further inspection, he finds out that it's something even worse. Those are the delinquents from his class. He really doesn't want to have to deal with them, so he intends to sneak away in the other direction. But as he starts heading that way, he realizes the popular girls are here as well, along with the gym bros and the nerds. He doesn't think the nerds are that bad since he regularly hung out with them back in school, but he still doesn't want to have to talk to them. Finally, he notices the student council group, which has the class rep in it. While he may hate socializing with the people in his class, he has to admit that the class rep has always been really nice to him. So it would be the least he could do to return that kindness, even if it's just to say hello. He briefly considers revealing himself and talking to her, but then again, he doesn't want to ruin the solitary life he already has. Since no one knows that he is here, he has the chance to be truly alone, like he has always wanted. There's no idle chatter, no taxes, and no one to annoy him. So he really doesn't want to mess that up by having contact with his classmates because they are already pretty annoying. That's why he officially decides that he will ignore his classmates and live by himself so he can conquer this world alone. Then Haruka hides from the other students, however. One of the delinquents hears something from his direction. He is about to be discovered, but the guys end up assuming that the noise came from the bunny that was supposed to be Haruka's dinner. Haruka spies on the delinquents to hear what they are discussing, but the perverts are just talking about girls. They are some real degenerates, but Haruka knows that the class rep will stop them from doing anything to the girls. However, the delinquents have a guy named Tanaka on their side, whose skills will allow them to do whatever they want. The delinquents go back to the other students, but Haruka is a serious loner, and he doesn't want anything to do with them. Haruka heads home to enjoy more of his delicious mushrooms, and he finds that his loner level has gone up. It's kind of a depressing title, because it's starting to wreck Haruka's self-confidence. Haruka is still only level 3, and he blames his Master of None and Dummy skills. He isn't sure what they do, but he assumes that Master of None means that he can't stay focused on any one thing long enough to make it really strong. However, it does allow him to accomplish a lot of different things. As for the dummy skill, Haruka assumes that it just makes him a puppet, which would make it the worst skill to ever exist. Haruka decides to eat his troubles away, but this just reminds him that he doesn't have any meat to eat. On day 7, Haruka wakes up to the sounds of fighting. He finds the nerds in battle and wonders if he should help them. He uses his appraisal skill on them and is shocked to find that they won't need his help at all. They have way better classes than him, and Haruka is the only one in need even among the nerds. This reminds him that, unlike him, they actually have overpowered skills. Unfortunately, this is a lot like how things were in his old world. His class was full of top athletes and as students they even had kids of celebrities. Haruka often wondered how he ended up there. Haruka determines that the dweebs can handle themselves, but he notices that some sneaky little monsters are sneaking up from behind them. Haruka remembers being friendly with the nerds in class, so he decides to help them out. The nerds thank him, and Haruka shows them his sweet-looking cave. They marvel at how fancy it is.
良い子は寝てる時間だよ。MP、まだ無理。ダメだ。オタクたちか。ちょっと苦戦してる。なんで俺だけ無職なんだよ。チートスキル持ちじゃん。全国トップレベルのアスリートや子供とかばっか。成績優秀な男女みたいな普通の生徒がいるのか。ゴブめ。しょうがねえ。
Haruka explains that he just learned how to use earth magic, and he used it to make his cave really secure. They wonder if Haruka did all this alone, so he points out that he's always alone. Haruka wonders why the nerds are with the other students, and he is shocked when they reveal that they're on the run. It all started when everyone was transported before Haruka. Everyone was in shambles because they didn't know anything about being Isekai, but the nerds were well versed on this subject. They were already assigning points into their skills, so the jocks demanded information from them. Everyone else was falling apart, but the class rep knew that they needed to keep quiet in the woods. It was too late, however, as they were already found by a group of goblins. Haruka is shocked to hear that even the delinquents were trembling in fear. But this was the perfect time for the nerds to shine. They acted like they were the protagonists of their own anime and began taking out the goblins. The jocks were inspired by all the nerdy bravery going on, so they helped out and the monsters were defeated. The class rep quickly gathered herself and led everyone to a safe riverside clearing. The nerds took the opportunity to shine even more as they helped everyone set up camp. Thanks to their lifelong dedication to avoiding touching grass, they became experts in all things Isekai, including survival. The class rep organized everyone and put them to work. Soon enough, everyone came together and began working as one. This didn't last long, however, as the popular girls decided that they didn't want to work anymore. The class rep tried to explain that their best chance of surviving was by sticking together, but the group started to fall apart. They were all tired of working so hard, so they just left all the responsibilities to the nerds. The class eventually fell apart completely, and there was nothing the class rep could do. From then on, only the class rep, the nerds, and a couple of other students did any work. The other students were just so lazy, so the nerds began to resent them. They were even in charge of doing all the fighting. The nerds were super dependable though, as they just wanted to get stronger and level up. This was because they saw what skills the delinquents picked. Some of the skills they chose were Charm and Puppeteer, 2 abilities that grant control over other people. The nerds knew that the delinquents had bad intentions, so they were leveling up to stand against them. The delinquents were working hard to level up as well because they needed to in order to use the skills. The nerds kept a very close eye on the delinquents, and they eventually heard what they planned to make some of the girls do. The nerds told the class rep, so she decided that she would have to level up as well. Unfortunately, the delinquents reached the level requirements for their skills soon after. The class rep just so happened to run into them at the worst moment, but seconds later, the delinquents were on the ground. The nerds were prepared for this very moment, and they used their seal abilities to seal the Charm and Puppeteer skills of the delinquents. They exposed the forced plans of the delinquents, so the delinquents ran out of the camp. However, one night, the delinquents made their return, and they got their revenge by using weapons. They destroyed the camp and declared that they would be back later to cause more chaos. For some odd reason, the nerds ended up receiving all the blame for what happened. The popular girls, whom they kept from becoming puppets, were the ones to turn on them first, and the other students followed. The class rep and a few other students took the nerds' side, but it was too much to deal with, and the nerds decided to just leave. Haruka feels really bad for them, so he throws a mushroom party for them. Haruka ends up spending the next day with the nerds as well, and he determines that not being a loner is okay sometimes. Eventually, Haruka says goodbye to his new buddies, and they offer to let Haruka join them. They're going to look for a town so they can get started as adventurers. Haruka agrees that he's closer to the nerds compared to the other groups, but he shocks everyone when he still declines. Haruka simply shoos them away, so the nerds leave.
委員長と一部の生徒は陽たちは気まずさのあまりお前ら今日のご飯は豪勢に行こう食え食えキノコクラスのやつらに駆られんなよはるかくんはどちらかといえば駆られませんってば本当に来ないんですかクラスでも僕たち側じゃああ確かにそうだなだが断るはよ行けしっし
Haruka admits to himself that he would like to head into town, but he knows that with his terrible stats, he would only hold the dweebs back. The nerds seem pretty worried about the class rep, so Haruka decides to go check on the other students. On his way there, Haruka is confronted by a kobold, but he manages to punch it into unconsciousness. Haruka is surprised to see that no students are left at the campsite, and his enemy detection skill reveals some footprints. Following the trail leads him to find the popular girls. Haruka panics and decides to get started on cooking dinner back home, but the girls try to stop him. They say that they just want to talk, but Haruka knows that being around them is the exact opposite of quiet solitude. Haruka runs for his life, but he is shocked when the girls politely ask him to stop by saying please. The girls explain that they're looking for the nerds, but Haruka assumes that they just want to put them to work again. The girls shock him, however, as they want to apologize to the nerds because they just now realize that they owe their lives to them. Haruka knows that these girls have never apologized in their entire lives, but they are very serious. Haruka breaks the bad news by explaining that they have no chance of catching up to the nerds, but they still want to know where they went. Haruka points out that they wouldn't make it out of the woods the way they are now because they don't even know how to fight. The girls are discouraged, but Haruka demands to know if this means that they're just going to give up. He demands to know if they're serious about apologizing to the nerds, and Haruka thinks about how he needs to test the girls for the sake of the nerds. Haruka's tough motivation tactic backfires, however, as the girls begin to cry. They just wanted to apologize to the nerds, but now they fear that they will be eaten. Haruka has no clue what's going on, so the girls beg for him to teach them how to survive until they find the nerds. Haruka accidentally says yes, and this activates his domination skill. This makes him rule over the girls, and Haruka wonders how this could have happened. The girls end up following him around like lost puppies with soulless eyes. It's also terrifying because the girls now finish off bad guys without a single word. They even bring crystals dropped by the monsters like they are dogs returning a frisbee. Haruka tries to heal the girls, but they just heal him even though he doesn't need it. Haruka fears what the class rep would say if she saw this, and he wonders how he can cancel his domination skill. Just then, the class rep finds him, but Haruka is thinking too hard about a solution to even notice. He doesn't realize that she's there at all, so she forces him to acknowledge her. Elsewhere, the delinquents make a plan of their own, and they determine that they must start by getting rid of their biggest problem. The class rep, however, doesn't seem to like the way he has been walking around with girls. When the class rep gets Haruka's attention, he panics because he doesn't know what to say to her. Come to think of it, he doesn't actually know what her name is. They've been in the same class since elementary school, and the class rep has always been nice to him. He can't believe he never bothered to learn her name. A few moments later, the rest of the girls from the class show up, since everyone aside from the popular girls was following the class rep's orders. Speaking of the popular girls, the class rep notices them standing behind Haruka, but they look like they're currently sharing a single brain cell. The class rep thinks Haruka must have done something to them. He would like to say he's innocent, but the fact of the matter is that even if he didn't mean to do it, his skill turned the girls into his servants, and he doesn't know what to do about it. He tries his best to explain the situation without making himself seem like the bad guy, but none of the girls actually believe him, so Haruka gives up on trying to prove his innocence and turns to walk away. Unfortunately, the class rep forces him to stay while she checks on Shimazaki to make sure she's alright. Luckily, a little shaking was all it took for the subjugation to be undone, so Shimazaki tells the class rep that she's alright. The class rep is relieved to hear that Haruka thinks that means he can leave now, but the class rep still wants to find out how the whole subjugation thing happened in the first place, so she refuses to let Haruka go yet. While the girls are talking, Haruka is left alone by a tree. And since he's got nothing to do, he decides to try practicing his magic so he can expand his house once he gets home. He begins trying to figure out how to make a basement, but he messes it up and accidentally buries himself in the ground from the neck down. He's stuck like that until the class rep finds him, and she is shocked to see him buried in the dirt when she just asked him to wait a few minutes. Boredom can drive a guy crazy. She walks over to Haruka's head to grab him so he can get out of the dirt, and once he is free, she apologizes for not trusting him, since Shimazaki told her that he was just trying to help everyone. Haruka doesn't recall ever saying he would help everyone, but the class rep and the other girls are already thanking him, so he decides to just go with it. Since everything has been settled, he wants to head back home, but the girls start getting mad because he wants to leave them out in the wilderness without helping at all. The class rep realizes Haruka just mentioned having a home, so she asks him about it. Haruka explains that he had some spare time on his hands, so he just kind of built a house. The class rep can't believe he managed to build an entire house by himself while they've been struggling to manage a camp. The other girls are extremely impressed as well, so they call a meeting and begin talking amongst themselves. The class rep asks how many people Haruka's house can accommodate, and from the way he designed it, it would fit about 240 people, but he would have to move some furniture around and empty the indoor pool. The class rep is really jealous of how well Haruka is doing for himself, and as much as she hates to bother him, she asks if she and the other girls can stay with him for the night since they're all currently homeless. Haruka freaks out because it's one thing to invite guys to stay over for the night, but this is an entire class worth of girls, and he's having a hard time controlling himself. Once he calms down, Haruka begins leading them all to his house, but because of all the time he has spent roaming these woods, he is far better at getting around. One of his skills even gives him some helpful pointers to keep him going in the right direction. Eventually, Haruka makes it back to his house with the girls, and after catching their breath, they are stunned by the magnificence of Haruka's house. It's been so long since they've had a roof over their heads or experienced the wonders of indoor plumbing, so as soon as Haruka mentions that there's a bath over in that direction, the girls start frantically running towards it and strip down right there in front of Haruka. There's no way he can handle spending an entire night in the same room with all of them, so he sets up a tent to be alone and prepares to go to sleep.
おいでませー。と、そっちがキッチンで。きっと夢だよこれ。向こうが。
Just then, the class rep walks into his tent because there's something she wanted to talk to him about. First of all, she thanks him for all his help because she wouldn't have known what to do without him. After the nerds left, the gym bros decided to leave as well, so the girls were all left on their own. It's been tough, but now that they've had a bath and a good meal, the girls are all in high spirits once more. Still, even though things worked out eventually, the class rep feels that she has failed as a representative because she couldn't do anything to help the class's situation by herself. Haruka thinks she's being a little too hard on herself because up till now, she's been the one protecting the girls and keeping them together. That may be true, but the class rep says it just got lucky because they didn't run into any monsters out there. If they had, she would have been powerless to protect the class, unlike the nerds. Again, Haruka doesn't think she's being fair to herself because the nerds have practically spent their whole lives preparing for this situation, so it's natural that they would be able to handle themselves well. However, on her end, this was the first time she had ever even heard about an Isekai, so all things considered, she's been doing pretty well. The class rep feels a lot better after hearing him say she did a good job, although her accomplishments still seem insignificant compared to Haruka, who created a functioning household in just a week. She wishes him a good night and heads back inside, but with everything that happened today, there's no way Haruka is getting any sleep tonight. Early the next morning, Haruka wakes up and finds one of the girls sitting outside his tent asking him to get up because breakfast is ready. It takes him a minute to realize what's going on, but when he finally does, he freaks out a little and says he actually wants to sleep in a little longer. The girl doesn't accept his answer and crawls on top of him to convince him to get out of bed, so Haruka gives up and asks what's for breakfast. He was expecting the usual mushroom soup with a side of extra mushrooms, but to his surprise, breakfast is actually fish today, and he is so excited that he accidentally headbutts the girl. The girl is slightly hurt, but Haruka couldn't care less because he finally gets to eat something other than mushrooms, and he absolutely loves it. Class Rap doesn't understand why he is so excited to be eating fish when he has been living next to the river this entire time. While that may be true, Haruka simply sucks at fishing, so he has never been able to catch any for the girls. They must have a reliable method of catching fish, so Haruka asks to see how they do it. The class rep agrees and takes Haruka to the river along with one of the girls who has a lightning magic skill. He asks her how she catches fish, and she explains that she kind of just electrocutes the water until the fish stop being alive. Haruka is really impressed, so he pleads with her to do it one more time. While the girl doesn't really want to, she agrees anyway since Haruka is helping her out. She spawns another lightning ball, but before she can throw it in the river, Haruka takes the lightning ball and seals it with his packing skill. He then tosses it in the river and is able to catch some fish as well. On top of that, he also acquires lightning magic, so he won't be needing the lightning girl's help anymore. The class rep asks what he just did, so Haruka explains that by using his packing skill on a particular element, he can gain that kind of magic. It's probably an effect caused by a combination of his many skills, which is definitely useful, but he still doesn't think it's impressive since he only has a bunch of useless skills. While the other girls are playing by the river, Haruka sits with the class rep and asks what she and the other girls plan to do after this. The class rep says the details still aren't certain yet, but they plan to head for the nearest village to try and catch up with the nerds. However, they're going to need to level up if they plan to make it out of this forest on their own, so Haruka offers to help them train before they leave. A short while later, all the girls are gathered out in the forest, and before Haruka begins his training camp, he says he would like to know what their current levels are. The girls tell him that their levels are all above 16, and Haruka begins feeling depressed because he's still only level 7 after all this time in the forest. He's honestly starting to doubt that the girls even need his help to begin with, so he decides to give them a small test and sets them up to fight a bunch of kobold to see how well they do. The girls think this will be a piece of cake since the kobold are only level 6, but a few moments later, they've all had their asses handed to them and are down for the count.
みんなのレベルを確認しておきたいんだけど
17です。20だけど。
16レベル高え。
21。16かな。
ちなみに俺はまだ。お、いいところに。これから皆さんには
暇
押してもらいます。手頃な低レベル3匹。レッツコボー。
やれやれだね。
The girls had no idea that the kobold would actually fight back, so they all head back to regroup and think of a new strategy. For some reason, the strategy meeting is taking place in Haruka's magic tent. They can all fit since Haruka's tent is able to expand, but he still has no idea why they chose to come here. After a little deliberation, the girls head back out and they are sure they won't lose this time. Haruka is glad that they seem motivated, but he honestly doesn't think they'll be able to win this time either. Once they've left, the girl from this morning approaches Haruka and says she wants to apologize for her behavior this morning. She was intentionally getting close to him just to see if he would try to take advantage of the situation if given the chance. She admits that she didn't trust him at first, but he gave them a place to stay, food to eat, and is even helping them learn how to fight, so she feels like she can trust him. She'll be back to wake him up tomorrow with his breakfast. Haruka is glad she trusts him and says he's looking forward to seeing her tomorrow, although he doesn't know her name, so he's just going to call her Fish Girl. The next morning, Haruka is happy to receive the fish from Fish Girl, but then he hears the other girls talking about going out to fight Kobold again for revenge. Before they can leave, the class rep calls them back and says they need to train first because they are definitely going to lose again if they go back to fight now. She suggests they practice by fighting goblins, but when they actually start a fight against the goblins, it doesn't go well for the girls. Despite this loss, some of the girls still think they're ready to fight the kobold, although a bunch of them pretend to be sick to avoid having to fight anymore. Haruka doesn't think this is going to end well, so he's prepared to intervene if necessary. However, to his surprise, the girls actually learn from their mistakes against the goblins and work together to take down the kobold. The class rep congratulates them all on their victory, and Haruka is relieved because this means the girls can handle themselves and won't need to stay with him anymore. He believes he can finally get back to his life as a loner, but the class rep comes over and thanks him for agreeing to come with them to the nearest village. He knows for a fact he never said he would join them, but the class rep is really insistent, so he caves in and agrees to go with her. A little while later, everyone has packed their stuff and is ready to leave the forest, but Haruka reminds them that they don't know what they might run into out there, so they should all keep their guard up. At the same time, in a different part of the forest, one of the boys from the class is seen running for his life. When he makes the mistake of turning around, he trips over a rock and is now cornered by his attacker, and having nowhere to run, he ends up getting strangled to death. The next day, Haruka leads the group through the forest, alert to the possibility that their bullies might be lurking nearby. As the leader, his priority is the group's safety, and the quickest way to ensure that is to reach the city as soon as possible. However, the bullies aren't their only worry. The forest itself holds its own dangers. Suddenly, a massive orc blocks their path. Haruka orders everyone to stand back and carefully assess the situation as he faces the creature. The orc swings its club, narrowly missing, giving Haruka a chance to gauge its speed. According to what they know, this type of orc has high resistance to physical attacks. Magic is the best way to defeat it. With that in mind, Haruka opens his menu, browsing his spells across the 4 elements: fire, water, earth, and air abilities he has honed in practical ways, even for chores. Despite the threat, Haruka is completely focused on his own actions. The orc resumes its assault, smashing a tree that Haruka had used for cover. As its swings grow dangerously close, Haruka quickly maneuvers behind it and strikes it with a stick, surprising everyone. The orc collapses with a single hit. Haruka grows pensive, having just stated that orcs are resistant to physical attacks, yet he has defeated one with just a stick. The girls gather closer, puzzled by the odd encounter. Even Haruka can't explain it but promises to use magic next time. Before long, the group encounters another orc. This time, Haruka tests his fire magic, hurling a fireball to win with ease, once again leaving everyone puzzled by his effortless victory.
調子に乗りつけ暇ほあらっと魔法でもなかなか死なないって聞いたけど
The girls realize Haruka might be too overpowered for a conventional fight, but by nightfall, they are less frustrated, especially with roasted meat at their improvised campsite. A little further off, Haruka uses earth magic to set up a deep pit trap for security. His magical tents not only repel monsters but also detect nearby presences, ensuring the group's safety. With the camp secure, he maps out the route for the next day, checking the river's location. When he suddenly senses a presence nearby, he rushes to investigate. He spots some figures, fearing they're the bullies, but instead finds friendly athletes, suspicious of their intentions. Haruka assumes they're after someone in the forest, but they clarify they're actually looking for him. Meanwhile, the girls don't trust anyone from the class. The athlete's leader, however, warns Haruka of a dangerous skill roaming the forest that's more concerning than hypnosis or mind control, a skill called hijack. Haruka recalls hearing of this skill, and the athlete confirms it, but it isn't the delinquents who have it, rather, it's an outsider. Haruka jokingly taunts the athletes, suggesting he might possess the skill himself. They admit it might be better in his hands than in the bullies and ask if he knows how to use it. Embarrassed, Haruka admits he only has the magic of servitude, a concept the athletes aren't familiar with but trust him regardless. A bit annoyed, Haruka warns them not to underestimate lunars. They insist they mean no harm and just wanted to warn him about hijack while monitoring the bullies. Finally, they ask Haruka to pass along their apologies to the girls for past incidents, then take their leave. The next morning, Haruka gathers the team to resume their journey and notices the girls seem unusually upbeat, leaving him curious. As he steps aside, the class representative approaches, wanting to discuss his encounter with Kazak's group. Haruka mentions their apology, but she has something more serious to say. She reveals she's the one with the hijack skill. Surprised Haruka hadn't figured it out sooner, she admits she'd asked Oda's group to keep her hijack skill a secret. Now that Haruka knows, she wonders why he chose to help her despite the skill's deadly nature, one that lets her steal someone's abilities by taking their life. Haruka responds lightly, but she explains that hijack is considered the most terrifying and sinister ability. Haruka remarks that even a group of nerds who had sealed away other dangerous skills hadn't touched hers, believing only she should wield it. Touched, the class rep tears up, playfully blaming Haruka for making her cry. He jokingly dashes off, though she's grateful for his support. Later, the group continues toward the river. Once they reach the spot Haruka had planned, he suddenly dashes forward, testing his magic infusion and using his magic weight skill to make himself lighter. This lets him leap high into the air, hopping from branch to branch until he reaches a great height. Despite his efforts, he still hasn't learned to fly, so he crashes down, nearly losing all his HP. He would have died without his magic infusion, but at least he's found the right path, even if it involved briefly playing bird.
委員長はそっちをお願い。まずは魔力点のスキル金量魔法で体をここからはたとえチートスキルじゃなくてももっとさらにはいグラ
Shaken, Haruka tries to explain to the class rep why he returned to the escort team all banged up, but his explanation falls flat. At dawn, the group sets off again, this time taking a fast route. Various events unfold along the way. Despite these incidents, the team stays united, pressing toward their goal. Eventually, a storm clears, and they find the forest exit with the girls cheering. Haruka, however, remains cautious, scanning the hills for any hidden dangers. Checking his menu, he finds he's learned the airwalk skill from his previous leap. He quickly tests it, using it to scan the area for safety. As they proceed, he spots some locals under attack by monsters. Though he hesitates, uncertain if the strangers are trustworthy, the girls insist on helping. The class rep even promises to fight if they turn out to be bandits. Knowing how she'd react, Haruka decides to handle it alone to avoid risking his companions. To reach the struggling group quickly, he uses the wind tornado spell he tried the previous day. Unfortunately, the tornado pulls the class rep along with him as she grabs his cloak to keep from falling. They realize too late that they can't stop as planned and crash into the group's carriage like a meteor. After the dust settles, Haruka has already dealt with a nearby monster, and the class rep steadies herself. The group's leader, a black-haired man named Ofter, introduces himself, and another man, Pal Gatek, joins him. Haruka asks about the attack, and Ofter explains that a pack of great green wolves ambushed their merchant caravan, and the guild placed a bounty on them. Their team tried to take the job, but underestimated the wolves' strength. Afterward, Haruka grills a mushroom for Gatek, who excitedly identifies it as a buff shroom, a rare mushroom that grants a temporary power boost. Surprised, Haruka shares it, helping the girls quickly recover. Watching the group interact, he feels oddly at ease around the newcomers. Soon, the rest of the group catches up to Haruka, and the girls are thrilled to meet an elf for the first time. The locals guide them to the long-awaited city. To mark the moment, the group draws a line in the dirt as a symbol of their new chapter and leaps over it, facing their future together. Meanwhile, the bullies train and level up deeper in the forest, determined to find the girls for a showdown. One boy, recently captured, suggests breaking the seal on their puppet and hypnosis skills, but they'll need someone with a sealing ability, meaning they must track down the group of nerds with that skill before seeking revenge. Returning to the city of Omawai, the group members are enchanted by its beauty and liveliness, finally realizing they are truly in another world. Everyone is happy, except for Haruka, who doesn't feel this place is quite right for a loner like him. The girls are thrilled by the unique clothing stores and convenient shops filled with items they've never seen before. However, despite the initial excitement, the class representative reminds them there's something important they need to take care of. Seeing her rush off to fulfill her task, Haruka at least finds some comfort in knowing he brought everyone here safely, assuming his mission is now complete. Around the city, two girls remark that the buildings look like cupcakes and wonder if they could eat the houses. The representative has to be the voice of reason, reminding them that stones aren't exactly good for digestion. Struggling to keep up with the group's overwhelming enthusiasm, she asks Haruka for help, but he's already taking the opportunity to relax in the shade with a drink. Immediately, the class rep scolds him, acknowledging that he's just completed his mission but insisting that relaxing in an unfamiliar place is pushing it too far. In response, she blows a whistle, ordering all the girls to line up and salute. Once they do, she announces what needs to happen next. First of all, they need to head to the Adventurers Guild to sell off the junk they've collected so far and register as adventurers. After that, they'll need to find a place to stay for the night. The next day, they'll ask around about Oda's group. Upon hearing this, Shimazaki, the leader of the popular girls, asks why Oda's group is being pushed down the list of priorities. The rep, feeling cornered, explains that wasn't her intention. Haruka seizes the moment to tease that Shimazaki is really worried about the nerds, but she denies it, embarrassed to admit the truth. Either way, they finally head to the Adventurers Guild, and Haruka feels intimidated just by the exterior of the building. Inside, it gets even worse as the place is filled with rough-looking characters who stare at the newcomers. After a while, one of the men in the guild approaches Haruka and informs him that the guild master wants to see him. Haruka quickly asks the rep to handle registration while he deals with this problem. Nervous about all the eyes on him, Haruka heads toward Galtech the guild master's office with a menacing appearance. Galtech asks if the boy in front of him is Haruka. Trembling, Haruka confirms, but to his surprise, the master stands up and politely thanks him for saving Odia's group, relieving Haruka, who had feared something much worse was about to happen. Feeling calmer now, Haruka wanders through the guild and finds the place where he can sell his magic stones. He heads to the counter where a woman explains she'll assess the item's worth. Wasting no time, Haruka dumps dozens of stones on the counter, but the staff member warns him that it's impossible to calculate such a large amount at once, and he'll need to wait until tomorrow for all the items to be evaluated. At this point, the girls inform Haruka that they've all registered as adventurers. Both Ofter and Galtech admit they underestimated the girls, never expecting them to be above level 30. Speaking of which, Shimazaki nudges Haruka to register as well, and for once, he's excited to finally belong to an official group in this new world. Seeing her friend's enthusiasm, the class rep comments to Ofter and Galtech that Haruka is bound to become an excellent adventurer since it was thanks to him that they all made it safely to the city. Haruka begins his registration but quickly learns he needs to be at least level 10. Since he's only level 9, he drops to his knees in despair, begging for an exception, but the staff member doesn't budge, further informing him that he also needs to be part of a group and can only proceed solo as an apprentice at level 20. Once he reaches level 30, he will finally be recognized as a true adventurer. Devastated by this news, Haruka reflects that level 20 is still a long way off, and thanks to his loner skill, he can't officially join any group. Watching the scene unfold, the rep sees how shaken her friend is and takes responsibility for finding lodging for everyone that night.
登録お願いしま
オフタさん、ガテクさん、
お、そうなのか？
私たちが今こうしていられるのも残念ですが、冒険者はレベル10からでないと。
そこをなんとか
で、ちなみに単独一人前として認められます。
ルのせいでパーティーも組めないし。
はるかくん。
兄ちゃん。
So by the evening, she leads the team to the hotel recommended by the guild, but Haruka isn't too pleased with the strange look of the place. As they enter, a young receptionist welcomes them with open arms, mentioning that the guild had informed her about the new arrivals. Noticing the hearts on each door, Haruka wonders if this is some sort of roadside love hotel, to which the rep tells him to pipe down. Later, he realizes there's nothing particularly odd about the rooms and even feels comfortable in the bed, though he admits to himself that he misses the forest. At the same time, Shimazaki wonders where Oda and the other boys are. When morning arrives on day 19, since the class arrived in this world, everyone is having breakfast when the rep announces that the city is relatively safe and has all kinds of shops. Seeing the girls' happiness, Haruka senses that they'll do well here, while he plans to return to the forest once he sells his magic stones. Speaking of which, when he returns to the guild and sees the offer they made for his stones, the staff member tosses a bag of money onto the counter, apologizing that it's all they can offer for now. Haruka tells her to calm down as the guild master steps in to reinforce that they haven't even finished counting all the stones yet. As Haruka can see, they don't have enough money to pay for all of them at once, so they offer to pay him in installments. When Haruka accepts the offer, the master sets aside 8 million heals as the first payment, and Haruka reflects that if he's not mistaken, this money is worth almost the same as Japanese currency, which means he now holds just over $52,000. Next, the guild worker explains the market values in this world. In Haruka's case, he had enough F-rank magic stones to total 8 million heals, not to mention the bonus he earned from the Green Wolf mission they completed while saving Odia's group. With that money in hand, the class representative announces it's time to buy essential items. Galtech chimes in, saying he knows a great place where they can spend all that money, and Haruka starts thinking about the kind of place he would love to visit, undoubtedly filled with women. Foolishly, he heads to Galtech with that thought in mind, though he suspects it might be a bit early for such an event. Shortly after they arrive at the place Galtech mentioned, a shop filled with items directly taken from dungeons. While the shop owner might seem a bit odd, but he turns out to be a good guy. Right away, Haruka tests the invisibility cloak, the power gloves, the fire staff, and the mana-cutting sword. Completely smitten with everything, he comes across a necklace called 7 Shops. And the shopkeeper explains that this accessory allows you to fuse the effects of 7 other pieces of equipment into it. Even more obsessed with this item, Haruka is interrupted by the class rep, who orders him to return to the hotel immediately because it's time for bed. Frustrated, the lone wolf asks if he can at least test one more item, the mistletoe twig, which strengthens magical staffs and rods. However, as he grabs the object, he accidentally activates it and fuses all the equipment without even having paid for the magical necklace. The shop owner is furious and informs him that the item is worth over 10 million heals. So, Galtech and the class rep try to persuade the shopkeeper to sell it at a discount. Even the situation by the 20th, Haruka was completely broke due to his mishap, even though there was still so much he wanted to buy. Fortunately, the shopkeeper reduced the price of the item to 8 million, but now the kid is flat broke again. And now, even if he wants to gather more magic stones to sell, outsiders can't leave the city without first becoming adventurers and obtaining a permit. And if he tries to sneak out with the girls, the class rep definitely won't allow it. Faced with this, Haruka concludes that city life isn't for him, and he needs to find a way back to the forest. At least now, he has the invisibility cloak fused with his peasant set, which will be incredibly useful. With it, Haruka sneaks past all the girls from his class and makes his way to the city wall. But just as he's about to leap over and escape, a few girls from the class call out to him, causing him to crash into the wall.
この効果を使えば言ったら止められる。うまくいった。あとは外壁を飛び越え。
Putting that aside for now, he and the girls witness one of their group members almost stripping in public to test out a new outfit, so Haruka rushes to stop her from causing a scene. In the end, his first escape plan was a failure. On the 21st, the girls prepare to go on their first mission. Haruka asks to join them, but the class rep shuts him down after his attempt to flee the previous day. Still, after their departure, the lone wolf sneaks past the gate guard with his invisibility cloak and makes it to the outside. Overjoyed, he sprints back to the forest, ignoring every obstacle in his way, including a group of bandits attacking a carriage with a defenseless girl inside. However, the bandits attack him, not wanting to leave any witnesses, forcing Haruka to fight. So he summons his fire bullet to take care of the situation and return to the forest. With that, he takes down all the thugs and realizes that his wooden staff has evolved into a cane, becoming much stronger, all thanks to the mistletoe twig he activated in that shop. Or maybe the fire staff he fused also had an effect. Soon after, the bandits rise again and discover their opponent is merely a level 9 boy, so they prepare to use weapon skill techniques that only those at level 20 and above can wield. The first uses slash, the second uses double, and the third strikes with dash. Haruka notices that these are powerful skills, but the thugs have no idea how to use them properly, so they end up exhausting themselves and losing on their own. With this, the lone wolf realizes that while weapon skills are potent, these enemies were still weak and couldn't handle their own abilities. Then, the girl from the carriage thanks the stranger who saved her. She introduces herself as Muriel, a noble with such an odd personality that even Haruka can't quite understand her behavior. She explains that she's the daughter of a local lord and asks the young man to accompany her for the rest of her journey, as she doesn't feel safe after the attack. Of course, she's more than willing to show her gratitude for his help, though Haruka was eager to return to the forest. That last part convinced him to stay and assist. Inside the carriage, Muriel asks which city Haruka came from, so he explains that he came from a horrible place with a lousy guild where they don't even let visitors leave whenever they want. Because of this and other reasons, the boy is certain the lord of that city is as awful as the place he governs. Upon hearing this, Muriel starts crying as she's the daughter of the lord of the city Haruka just insulted. By the way, this carriage is headed back to Omui. Upon realizing this, Haruka panics and tries to get out, but the noble insists she needs to reward him for saving her. Meanwhile, the athletes and the bullies clash in the forest, but the leader of the athletes is pierced by an enemy's blade. After the fall of their first ally, the group realized the situation was far more dire than they had imagined. The blade that struck the boy hadn't come from the bullies, but from an independent figure who seemed to be acting on his own. This swordsman quickly dispatched another bully, driving his blade into their torso and swiftly downing a third. Despite this, the remaining bullies, furious at seeing their comrades defeated so easily, continued their attack. As expected, the mysterious swordsman swiftly cut down the last two bullies, all in the blink of an eye. Faced with this reality, the athletes fled in panic. Circling ahead, the swordsman intercepted their escape, proving that no one could leave without his permission. Turning back to Haruka, who was anxious about returning to Omuai, the last place he wanted to be, Muriel gave him a pleading look, asking if he really needed to be so dramatic about it. Haruka, exasperated, said it wasn't fair of her to make puppy dog eyes just to get her way, as it made it hard for him to refuse. Reluctantly, he arrived at the Lord of Omui's mansion, a massive house that made him feel insignificant. He noticed a painting that seemed to show the Lord and his wife happily together. Though Haruka wanted nothing more than to leave as soon as possible, as he edged toward the nearest exit, Muriel reappeared, annoyed that he hadn't waited for her to change as she requested. Haruka, pretending he was only waiting outside, had his intentions quickly seen through. Frustrated, Muriel made it clear that she'd see him rewarded one way or another, so he should stay put. Later, to show her sincerity, she dragged him to a feast laid out on the table. Haruka gave up on his plan to escape and enjoyed the meal. Afterward, Muriel had a maid bring a cash reward for his assistance. Moreover, she presented Haruka with an only identity card, allowing him to come and go from the city freely. In return, she only asked that he remember the name of this town. But Haruka's mind was more focused on the texture of the pudding he was about to eat. Embarrassed, Muriel softly mentioned that she had dressed up for him, only for him to act so carefree. On the 22nd, Haruka returned to the inn where his group was staying. He explained he hadn't tried to escape, but that the city lord had invited him to his mansion. Suspicious, the girls pressed him on why he'd been invited, but he played ignorant. Most of them eventually dropped the topic and set off on a mission, leaving Haruka hopeful that the others would also forget about it. However, the class representative insisted that he couldn't leave the city. Smiling slightly, Haruka assured them he understood, and once they left, he immediately prepared for another escape using his invisibility cloak. This time, he had a trump card, the only identity card given to him by the Lord's daughter. He slipped through the city gates and decided to spend some of his reward money on supplies. He indulged in various foods, not mushrooms this time, and left a note for the class representative. In it, he mentioned he was heading to check on the athletes in the forest and asked the girls to keep training while he was gone. Arriving at the exit, Haruka encountered a burly guard, but his new ID secured his freedom from Omui. This time, if he came across any carriage in distress, he'd ignore it and continue on his way. Eventually, he reached the forest, where familiar mushrooms grew in the underbrush, fish swam in the river, and monsters lurked as usual. Haruka felt at home again. However, he spotted an orca creature unusual for this part of the forest. Nevertheless, the items he bought and his only card proved useful, and he defeated the creature with ease.
相変わらずのキノコに川で泳ぐ魚たち。これぞ森だ。俺はここに帰ってきた。我が家が恋しい。それにしても楽勝だな。
As the sun began to set, he noticed something odd, a blood stain on a rock. Assuming it wasn't from the ice skating nerds, he guessed it belonged to the athletes. Following a trail of footprints and blood, he soon found the athletes injured on a rock. He immediately tossed several mushroom-based healing potions to them, and as they recovered, the leader, Kazaki, recognized Haruka and asked if the girls were safe. Haruka assured him they were, thanks to the athletes. With that, Kazaki felt a sense of pride knowing he'd helped protect the class. Haruka finished by telling them they were truly the best athletes the class could have. As night fell, Haruka learned that all the bullies were dead, and no one knew where the nerds had gone. The killer was an unknown figure who seemed unstoppable, having stolen all the weapons the delinquents brought into this world. According to Kazaki, the swordsman was a brilliant strategist who likely planned this entire scheme. The leader suspected the stranger was targeting the class representative, as she possessed the abduction skill, a powerful ability that allows her to steal the abilities of enemies she kills, making it one of the most coveted skills imaginable. Haruka felt uneasy, as only he and the nerds should have known about the representative's skill. However, the athletes had guessed her ability because the swordsman had persistently asked about her. Ultimately, the mysterious attacker spared the athletes, hoping they'd lead him to the class representative, his ultimate target. Yet, the athletes decided to evade him by wandering through the forest, nearly meeting their end in the process. Now, with the enemy surely on their trail, Kazaki believed they could win by combining their forces with Haruka. However, Haruka preferred to stay uninvolved. His only desire was to live peacefully alone in the forest. Still, duty calls, and he could not ignore what was happening. He agreed to help but insisted on fighting solo, urging the athletes to head back to the city and join the girls. After the group departed, he reflected that he would have preferred having them cover the rear, but if everyone perishes, there would be no one left to protect the girls. Meanwhile, the girls searched for Haruka around Omuwai. Despite the note he left, the class representative couldn't help but worry. Back in the forest, Haruka recalled the athlete's insight into the swordsman's weapon skill, which was powerful but left the user vulnerable once initiated, with no way to cancel it. To exploit this weakness, Haruka knew he had to level up, so he began defeating goblins along the way. Though it wasn't enough, he needed tougher enemies. Fortune favored him when he encountered the Goblin King, which could give him the experience boost he needed. Haruka carefully dodged the king's massive club and found an opening to cast his signature magic envelope, which combines multiple spells into one. This maneuver struck a fatal blow. Unexpectedly, the Goblin Emperor appeared, a level 50 creature far beyond Haruka's level 9. Haruka knew he couldn't face this monster head-on, but he also realized escape was not an option. He used the same spell combination tactic, launching an attack that damaged the Emperor but did not defeat it. The Emperor retaliated, striking Haruka's face, forcing him to dodge to avoid a deadly blow. Finding a brief opening, Haruka countered with his staff, reducing the Emperor's HP by half. However, the monster began to heal itself and unleashed a powerful skill that sent Haruka crashing into trees. Barely holding on, Haruka remembered his friends were counting on him, which fueled his resolve. With renewed determination, he threw himself at the Emperor for one final all-out attack.
普通に戦ったら絶対に勝てない。虚実のスキル。最速で振り切れ。 直かなりきつい状況だな。弱音なんか吐いてられない。
Hours later, with dawn breaking, Haruka stood victorious but exhausted, celebrating his new level 11 status. Returning to his cave, he examined his new skills, discovering that his magic envelope now had a perk that negated the usual delay, allowing him to attack instantly upon selecting it. Soon after, a figure approached Haruka's dwelling, revealing himself as Tanaka, the boy who had supposedly been bullied but had orchestrated a far more elaborate plan. In Omawai, the girls returned after a day of hunting and found the athletes by the city wall. Kazaki explained that Haruka remained behind to face an enemy in the forest. Meanwhile, back at Haruka's cave, he sarcastically welcomed Tanaka, who lamented that he hadn't yet reached the class representative through the wounded athletes. Despite all of his efforts to manipulate the bullies and use them as pawns, Tanaka confessed to being the mastermind all along. Tanaka revealed he had used the delinquents to split up the class, infuriating Haruka, who demanded to know the fate of the other members. With chilling indifference, Tanaka revealed they were all dead, and eager to obtain the abduction skill, declared he had no time to waste on someone with worthless skills like Haruka. In response, Haruka raised his weapon, blocking Tanaka's path, ready to end their deadly confrontation right there. This is the end of Loner Life in Another World Episode 6. Thank you so much for staying on this channel and watching our videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you updated with our latest content. See you in the next video.